Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, we're 1 week into the season. What are the key takeaways through the first three games? Also, fun with extremely small sample sizes. We'll get you ready for Wolves Mavs tonight, too. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Happy Timberwolves game day. The Wolves have already gotten 2 days off in a row. They haven't played since Saturday. And they get two more after tonight. Wolves Mavs tonight on TNT in a rematch of the conference finals. We'll talk about that toward the end of this show today. First, though, now that we are 3 games in, I want to talk about key takeaways from the first 3 games. We'll talk about the offense. We'll talk about the Randall minutes that how those two have looked together. Some of the concerns I had coming into the season related to offensive synergy for the Wolves. What does that look like? We'll also look at fun with small sample sizes with a focus on the lineups so far this year, what the Wolves' best and worst lineups to this point have been. And we'll talk about a couple other things too, small sample size related. Big thank you, though, off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder about the new newsletter, introducing the Locked On Wolves daily newsletter. It's one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. Again, LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. All right, so we are 3 games in. The Timberwolves are 2-1 and easily could be 3-0. They survived the last couple games. It was a wire-to-wire win last time out, but the Kings game was a bit dicey last week. The Lakers game, the Wolves played terribly. They easily could have won that game too. So, well, there hasn't been like a true start-to-finish dominant performance because, the Raptors win was wire-to-wire. It was still, they've played better, right? Last year, not this year. But what are the key takeaways through 3 games? And, coming into a really tough week, I mean, like the Wolves have the Mavs tonight. The Wolves have the Nuggets on Friday. And then they go to San Antonio on Saturday on the second night of a back-to-back. So first back-to-back of the season. They're playing 2 really good teams, 2 playoff opponents from last year in Dallas and Denver, a couple of national TV games. So higher stakes this week, at least in terms of national perception. And obviously caliber of opponent as well with Dallas, Denver, and Wembanyama on the schedule this week. So a big week ahead. And thankfully, the Wolves are, relatively healthy at this point. Mike Conley said on Monday he's been dealing with a wrist injury, apparently for years, that he's been playing through that's flared up and is bothering him more here lately. So, but besides that, this team's relatively healthy. And they've only played this just like random notes so far this year. They've only played 9 guys, right? Like we had these questions about the rotation. There's very clearly a top 8. And Joe Ingles is holding that 9th rotation spot where you play a handful of minutes in the first half, and that's it. We haven't seen Rob Dillingham. We haven't seen TJ Shannon. We haven't seen Josh Minot. And certainly doesn't seem like we're going to, on Tuesday with 2 days rest before the Dallas game, and then 2 days rest again before the Denver game on Friday. So maybe with the back-to-back Friday, Saturday, we see a bit of those younger players on the fringe of the rotation play. But right now, there's a clear top 9. And that's just what Chris Finch's rotation has been. So I guess that's my first takeaway is like, hey, there's a solid rotation that Chris Finch has leaned on, and it's been basically the same every single night. To this point, you have 8 of those 9 guys averaging north of 20 minutes per game. 8 of 9 players in the rotation are averaging at least 20 minutes. Joe Ingles is under 6 minutes a game. He's played in all 3 games, but he's averaging 5.7 minutes per game. So there's a very clear top 8, which that's a pretty short rotation as far as regular season rotations go. So I'll be interested to see when Chris Finch decides to expand it a little bit. Again, my money's on maybe Saturday in San Antonio against an opponent they should still beat, even with Wemby. And of course, Chris Paul and everything going on. It's a team that's on the rise. But on the second night of a back-to-back on the road, there's an opportunity for some of those younger guys to potentially get some minutes. Okay. Now into some of the other takeaways. Let's talk about the offense first. The offense has had some moments this year. It's actually had some really impressive moments. It's such a small sample size that it's silly to talk about offensive rating. Right now, they're 13th in the league. Of course, that's up from last year. They finished, I think, 16th last season, but they were like hovering around 20 for much of the year. And the offense overall, to me, it's been better than I expected early in the season. And there certainly have been moments where it was ugly, like the Lakers game, stretches in both the Kings game and late in the Raptors game where it was ugly. But Ant, for the most part, he's had like 3 or 4 truly dominant quarters where he just looks like the best player on the floor, and there's no question about it. And then he's had a couple quarters where he looks like, second year Ant, where he's forcing things, bad turnovers, etc. And it's early in the season. But the overall flow of the offense, choppy in the Lakers game, choppy for the first part of the Kings game. But since then, I think it's been overall really good. It hasn't simply just been a Randall Ant, my turn, your turn offense. I think that's actually been handled fairly well, where they've ran sets for each of these guys. They've given Randall his opportunity to go ISO in good spots on the floor. They've cleared out for him. They've ran actions to get him the ball, free throw line extended in the high post where he can go to work and get to the middle of the paint and be effective there. It really, the last game and a half or so, hasn't felt all that clunky. And we've seen them also have, like, when Naz Reid's on the floor, we'll talk about lineups here in a minute. Naz Reid lineups look great so far this year. I thought he played really badly against the Lakers, but he's been good since then. And they've had these lineups where they've basically, when Naz is on the floor, they're now actually calling plays for him. It didn't, like early last year and the year prior, it was, kick out, shoot an open three, get an offensive rebound and a putback. They weren't running plays as much for Naz, and they've had him in the corners, attacking from the corners. They've had sets where the intention is to get the ball to Naz Reid, an advantageous place to score. And that's been really successful for Naz Reid to this point this year. So I think featuring Naz when given the opportunity has been smart. And some of the stuff Naz does, he's obviously a very different player than Julius Randle, but some of the same situations where Naz can be most effective are similar to what they do with Julius Randle. Playing off the catch, just catching and going. And with Naz, teams really have to respect the three-point shot even more so than they do with Randle. And that should open up driving lanes for Naz Reid even more. And I do think we've seen that a little bit to this point in the season. Again, outside of the first game, maybe game and a quarter, game and a half, I would not describe the Randle Ant fit as clunky as I would have expected. In game 3 here against the Raptors, we saw real chemistry between Ant and Rudy, a little bit of Randle-Rudy chemistry, passing back and forth. Not quite to the level of the Rudy Cat chemistry that we saw last year. But I think that the overall flow has been impressive, and I think Chris Finch has done a good job of actually calling some more set stuff. I think more than what we saw. And honestly, like, we'll talk more about DiVincenzo here in a little bit too, but the addition of Dante DiVincenzo gives them a true movement shooter that they can call stuff for. And they've experimented with calling some of the stuff for Naz too. It's very unusual to have somebody as big as Naz who they could treat as a movement shooter. And then the secondary reaction there is take the ball to the basket. And both Naz and Dante can do that. And so I think Chris Finch actually calling more structured sets has been interesting. He certainly has been. I don't think there's any question about that. And I think he's done a good job pushing the right buttons to this point. I want to talk about some small sample size numbers next, and really focus on some lineup data as well. And then toward the end of the show, we'll get into Wolves Mavs as well. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals and great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. No matter what live events you like to go to, you can find them at Gametime. Plus, Gametime Picks will curate the different events to make it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Again, anything you want to go to, you could find at Gametime. Their all-in pricing is something you could toggle on. It's a feature that will show you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Also, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and their lowest price guarantee means that Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you think you find a better ticket price somewhere else. Plus, Gametime ticket coverage means that your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's go ahead and talk a bit about some of the numbers that are truly, we'll call it small sample size theater. Fun with small sample sizes and like, admittedly, extremely small sample sizes, right? Like we're talking about a fraction of the season, a week in, 3 games in. Some teams, as of me recording this, have only played 2 games and, might be playing a third on Monday night. But like it starts to, like, we can start to see some trends here. And it's also pretty easy to point to specific games and say, like, okay, well, here's what happened in the Lakers game, the Kings game, the Raptors game, and we've done that a little bit already. But I think it's pretty interesting. I referenced the offense being, was it 13th in the league in terms of offensive rating earlier? They are currently number 2 in 3-point rate, again, through 3 games. But that is really, really good to see. Remember, last season, the Wolves finished the season leading the league in 3-point percentage. I'm sorry, I guess they finished 3rd in 3-point percentage overall last season. But they were a top 3 3-point shooting team basically all year. They finished the year 3rd in 3-point percentage, and they were 17th in 3-point rate. And it's something Chris Finch talked about, like he wanted them to shoot more threes. They've done it so far this season. So last year they finished the year shooting, so they were 3rd in the league in 3-point rate. They were attempting 33 per game. Now, it's not the same thing, right? 3-point attempts per game versus 3-point. I'm sorry. They were not 3rd in 3-point rate. They were 3rd in 3-point percentage. Their rate was only 17th. They were shooting just under 33 threes per game. So 32.7 threes per game. Through 3 games this season, the Timberwolves are shooting 42.7 threes per game. Let me say that again. 42.7 threes per game. They were shooting 32.7 threes per game last season. So they're currently shooting 10 more 3-pointers per game than they shot last season. Will that last? I would be really surprised if they shot 43 threes per game all season this year. I really would be. In fact, more than half of their field goal attempts as an offense have come from outside the arc to this point in the season, which is insane. That's not going to last, but it's positive progress, and they're still 12th in percentage. So it's not like they're tossing up bricks. They're 12th in percentage. And frankly, them shooting, them being 2nd in rate and 12th in percentage is probably better than them being bottom 3rd in rate and 3rd in percentage. And we could do the math a little bit, play this out a bit further, get in the weeds on like how many makes per game and like what's the overall impact on the offense. But I think this is just as beneficial of a mix, if not better. So 12th in the league in percentage, 5th in threes per game, and 2nd in 3-point rate. That's a positive development to this point. The other thing that I thought was notable, and this isn't just for offense, this is across the board. The Wolves aren't bottom 3rd in really anything. They're 25th in opponent turnover rate, which fine, right? Like that'll come up. It should come up. I would expect it to come up. I'm not going to worry about that through 3 games. Offensive rebound rate, they're 24th. That's where they're going to be all season. That's roughly where they were last year. Besides that, the only other thing that they're really close to bottom 3rd in is free throw rate, and that's going to come up too. Julius Randle is going to play a big part in that. I think long-term, Anthony Edwards is going to play a big part in that. Right now, Julius is averaging just under 6 free throws per game. Ant's just over 4 per game, and I think that'll come up. I think that'll improve. So all things to keep an eye on. Everything else is pretty middle of the pack, right? I mean, they're middle of the pack in field goal percentage. They're 11th in free throw percentage. Pace is where you'd expect it to be, bottom 3rd, but like it's not overall going to be higher. It's too early in the season to talk about some of the the really specific instances I discussed before the season where they should be able to capitalize, right? Where it's running off of defensive rebounds, running when Rudy's off the floor, some of those different things that will, once we get a bit more data on this, we can dive in a bit deeper on. But to this point, all that stuff looks good. The other thing I want to really focus on is lineups. So through 3 games, the lineup they've used the most is, of course, their starting lineup. The starting lineup of Conley, Edwards, McDaniels, Randall, and Gobert is actually a minus 2.2 in 94 possessions. Now, obviously, 94 possessions is a small sample, but compared to the rest of the lineups, it's more than 3 times as many possessions as they played with any other 5-man unit this season. So, a minus 2.2. Not great. We don't have enough data yet league-wide to look at like what the percentile is for all these different categories. But their next most used lineup is a hybrid bench starter lineup with Edwards and Randall as the only starters on the floor, along with Dante DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Naz Reid. So basically 3 big guards, no pure point guards. All of them really like 2 guards, really. Ant, DiVincenzo, and Na are all really 2 guards. Playing together on the floor with Julius Randle and Naz Reid are a plus 27.8 in 29 possessions. Their next most used lineup, 25 possessions, so only 4 less, is that same lineup, but with Gobert instead of Randall. So it's Edwards, DiVincenzo, Alexander Walker, Naz Reid, and Rudy Gobert is a plus 68. They're 140 points per 100 possessions offensively, which is hilarious because of how small the sample is. And they allow just 72 points per 100 possessions defensively. That's insane. Now, maybe we'll check on this every week. We'll see where this lineup sits. It's never going to look this good. Or it's not going to look this good long term. But those are their best 2 lineups, and they're their second and third most used lineups. In fact, their next 4 lineups on this list are all negatives. You have to get all the way down to a lineup that's only been used 9 times to find another positive one. Sorry, by 9 times, I mean for 9 possessions. Conley, Edwards, DiVincenzo, Randall, and Gobert. The other thing that looking at the lineups really magnifies is how Mike Conley struggled this year. And you don't need lineup data to tell you that. The eye test would tell you that. Other more simple, quote unquote, advanced metrics would tell you that if you want to look at win shares or box score plus minus. But Mike Conley struggled to this point this season. I mean, he's shooting a lot of threes and he's not making threes. He's 22% from outside the arc and he's not contributing much else. That's where we're at through 3 games. And I expect that to change. But lineup wise, it's pretty intriguing to see just how good all the Naz Reid lineups have been. That's what stuck out to me the most. And secondarily, I mean, the thing that all these lineups have in common is that Naz is on the floor and DiVincenzo's on the floor. And Ant's on the floor for most of them. But Naz and DiVincenzo are the 2 kind of most common denominators, if you will, with the team's best lineups. And of course, both Rudy and Randall have been solid. There's no question about that. So we'll keep an eye on all the different, lineups and who plays with who and all that. As we get more data, it's gonna be a lot of fun to track that. Let's see. Okay. I feel like I had something else. Okay. So, I talked about how everything is basically middle of the pack for the Wolves this far and how that's beneficial. One other little thing that probably doesn't, I mean, who knows if it sticks or not. Again, 3 games in, Anthony Edwards continues to see his rebound rating increase and improve. His defensive rebound rate right now is over 16%, which would be the best of his career, compared to some of the past seasons. But we also saw his total rebound rate kind of stagnate the last couple of years, but still the last 2 years were greater than the first 2 years of his career. And that was something coming out of his first 2 seasons that I harped on was like, hey, it seems minor for a 2 guard, but somebody who's this big and this athletic and can be this aggressive and have, really impressive want to, he should rebound better. And he's started to improve that over the last 2+ seasons. And so far this season, the defensive rebound rate is up significantly. The total rebound rate is right in line with where it was last 2 seasons. And that's been really good to see. The turnover rate's ticked up slightly again, but I think that's more early season stuff than it is anything else. So that doesn't concern me at all, but we'll keep an eye on some of those different rate-based stats for Ant. Okay. Next, I want to talk about the Mavericks matchup. Mavericks are playing on Monday night, so they'll be on the second night of a back-to-back. We'll talk about that matchup, the rematch of the conference finals here next. All right, Timberwolves Mavericks on Tuesday night on ESPN, on TNT, 6:30 p.m. tip. It's the early TNT game of their doubleheader that they do on Tuesdays. And it's, of course, a rematch of the conference finals. A year ago, I talked about the Mavericks as a team I wanted the Wolves to play in the playoffs because, I think back to that post-trade deadline game a year and a half ago in the 22-23 season. Yes. After the Wolves, after the deadline, the Wolves took on the Mavs, and Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards were taking turns shutting down Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. They shut them down at the end of the game. The one-on-one defense was stellar, and the Wolves won. I was convinced that that was something the Wolves could continually do against a team that isolates so much. And because of the Wolves' high-end talent in terms of point-of-attack defense, I thought the Mavs wouldn't be that difficult of a matchup. Well, that was before Luka. I mean, Luka was obviously good. He's continued to get better. And even banged up last year in the playoffs, he really went supernova on the Wolves. And nothing the Wolves could slow him down. He was too physical for Jaden McDaniels, and McDaniels was in foul trouble. He was too big for even, frankly, Ant to guard him, but certainly Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And ultimately, the Wolves' best chance was to have Ant guard Luka. The problem was that Ant was so worn down already at that point for playing till the last week of May. And on top of that, the load he had to carry offensively for this Wolves team. And Ant didn't really stand a chance to slow down Luka Doncic. I'm curious to see what the Wolves do to guard Luka in the regular season, in this first regular season matchup between the two. Obviously, Ant should have as fresh legs as he's going to have. He's not going to be any more fresh as the year goes on. Assuming he's, in decent enough shape at this point. He played so much this summer. I think he probably is. I think it makes sense to put Ant on Luka, unless they're going to save that for later. This is the time to try some stuff. Perhaps this is where, I doubt it, but perhaps this is where we see Chris Finch break out Josh Minott. Big physical defender. Luka's crafty enough. He probably gets 3 fouls on Minott in, 2 minutes. But like Minott there could be a chance that he's the Luka stopper. A chance, right? Maybe not a big one, but he's got the physical profile. And hopefully, I would think the lateral quickness. Luka isn't the quickest player. He's more crafty and has incredible touch than anything else. And obviously is a very good shooter. But in my mind, Josh Minott actually fits the profile of somebody that should have a shot at stopping, or not stopping, but slowing down Luka Doncic, forcing him to be somewhat inefficient, to turn the ball over, etc. The combination of size, speed, athleticism, and defensive chops to do just that. Terrence Shannon's maybe got a shot. I think he's probably a little, even though he's big, physical, has an NBA body. Luka's so big and physical and so crafty. I don't know that TJ Shannon would do as good of a job, but I would give Josh Minott a crack, especially if Ant / Jaden get into foul trouble early. But Nickeil's too small. Obviously, Conley's too small. So I think it's got to be some combination of Ant, Jaden, and maybe Josh Minott. I would be really intrigued if the Wolves gave that a shot. That's the biggest question mark. Of course, Dallas has Klay Thompson now. That roster just had a couple significant changes, but that's it. It's largely the same rotation. And Klay Thompson's off to a good start in a Mavs uniform. Dallas won their first game. They beat San Antonio by 11 on opening night, and then they lost to Phoenix by 12 on Saturday. As I'm recording this, they're playing the Utah Jazz on Monday night, and actually, I think they just won. They did just win. They held on, won by 8. They're up double figures and had to hang on a bit at the end over Utah. But they're on the second night of a back-to-back, playing at home against Utah on Monday, traveling up to the Twin Cities to face the Wolves at 6:30, less than, call it, 18 hours after the end of that game. They tip off against the Wolves. So Minnesota has a big travel and rest advantage. 2 days more rest advantage and no travel. So they should have fresh legs. It may take a minute. The Wolves, who knows, 2 days off this early in the season, maybe they're a little bit of rust, as weird as that sounds. And, maybe they have to turn it on late, and hopefully fresher legs will be the difference in the second half. But it'd be good to get out to a good start against a team on the second night of a back-to-back that's on the road that maybe they'll roll over and give up, right? They at least have that shot. So if the Wolves can get out to a good start, maybe that's what could happen. I talked about Luka. I still worry about this team as an offensive rebounding threat. The Wolves need to be good on the glass, and they have been to this point in the season. Defensive rebound rate right now, they're 11th in the league. They should hover right around that 10 mark like they did last season. The Wolves should. They've got to be solid against Dallas. Those to me are the biggest things, right? It's guarding Luka one-on-one as best you can, and hopefully they give mine on a crack. I think that's number one. Number two is defensive rebounding against this team. You can't give them second chance opportunities, especially with the type of 3-point shooters they have. I mean, Dallas is a top 10 in 3-point rate so far in the young season. They're 7th in percentage, and they're middle of the pack offensive rebounding, but we know how good they were at doing that last year. Derek Lively, especially, Dwight Powell. They've got guys that you got to worry about on the offensive glass. Those are the biggest keys for me. And then also, I'll reiterate what I said a little bit ago. This is a big game simply because now you've got 2 days off and then you play Denver. You don't want to lose a couple of, early conference games, in Denver's case, a division game, when you're at home and have a rest advantage. And then you have a tough road game with the Spurs coming up too. So, and with this nice little 3-game homestand over the course of 7 days really, it's a golden opportunity for the Wolves to start this season 4-1. And I think that it's really important to do just that because of the opportunity they have. All right. That's all we got for you today here on this game. Of course, the Wolves, like I said, had 2 days off following the Mavs game. They take on Denver for the 8:30 game on ESPN on Friday. And then the schedule gets a little bit tougher. And it's important to bank some of these wins early in the season. We'll have the live postcast for you following the game on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. That audio will be here at Locked On Wolves as always. So go check that out. And then I'll be back on Wednesday with a post-game pod that'll post for you overnight early into Wednesday right here on Locked On Wolves. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can also follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. A reminder about the Locked On Wolves newsletter. The Locked On Wolves daily newsletter is a one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.